Chapter 7. Her Royal Lowness. The voice coming out of the tree root sounded like a bullfrog. If bullfrogs could do more than belch. Jessie and Daisy exchanged looks of surprise. Another talking tree? Jessie whispered. Daisy frowned. She wasn't so sure. She wasn't exactly an expert, but it didn't sound like a dryad. The hobgoblin shifted to clear path for the guests. Jessie and Daisy approached the strange tree root cautiously. Daisy peered into the tangle of hairy tendrils and thought she saw a pair of shiny eyes staring back at her. Perhaps it was a dryad after all. You find yourselves staring into the magnificent eyes of which we have not given you permission to do, the Queen of Hap said of the hobgoblin. High of Hobhorn said in a froggy voice. What's a hobhorn? Jessie wanted to know. It's our mountain home, the Queen said. You mean Old Mother Mountain? Daisy asked. You might mean Old Mother Mountain, said the Queen distastefully, but it's the hobhorn to us, and it always has been, and we would know, wouldn't we? Now hold your tongues, and go down on your knees before us. Jessie and Daisy each went awkwardly down onto one knee. The hobgoblins scrambled onto both knees and put their foreheads on the ground. Daisy looked over and shook her head at Jessie. No way, she whispered. As you were, croaked the Queen. Jessie and Daisy climbed to their feet again. How do you do? Jessie said politely. Daisy blurted, If you're a queen, what are you doing inside some dirty old root ball? The Queen bellowed, We have not given you permission to address us. Daisy rolled her eyes and mimed, zipping her lips. But to answer your question, nevertheless, said the Queen, which, we might add, is most astute. We are prisoners, and this foul ball of fibrous cellulose is our Jaily Waily. Jaily Waily? Jessie mouthed. Daisy had to cover her mouth to keep from giggling. We find ourselves in a uniquely helpless, not to say hapless, situation, the Queen said huffily. Daisy and Jessie bobbed their heads in a silent sympathy. After a pause, the Queen snapped. Oh, very well. You may address Her Eminence. Jessie went first. Did St. George put you, Your Eminence in here? He asked. Good guess, she croaked. So far we have one good question and one good guess. That's a better score than most upper realmers could earn. Daisy moved even closer to the ball and stared into the riot of roots. Sure enough, in their very center of the root ball, a hobgoblin squatted on her haunches. She looked just like her subjects, except she was softer and rounder looking, with big mossy green eyes, which were very magnificent, and reddish hair with a bit of curl to it. Instead of the orange jumpsuit, she wore a robe decorated with tiny snail shells. Daisy had never thought of brown being a pretty color for a garment, but this was the most beautiful hue of brown that Daisy had ever seen. It reminded her of the fresh dirt with a hint of glittering mica in it. Hey there, Your Royal Highness, Daisy said softly. That's royal lowness to you, said the Queen. Jessie poked his nose into the roots next to Daisy and asked, What's wrong with Highness? Highness, said Her Majesty testfully, like lightness is overrated by you upper realm types. I see, said Jesse, having never thought of himself as an upper realm type. I guess that makes sense to a hobgoblin brain. How did St. George catch your lowness? Daisy wanted to know. He tricked us, the Queen said with a heavy sigh. Not that we didn't, unfortunately, make it easy on him. He spun us that same old tired tale. A treasure of untold vastness lies beneath your hive, and to think that we fell for it. If we helped him find it, he promised to go halvesies. He led us here on a wild treasure chase, and before you could say, Hobbs, your uncle, we were stuck. Now the hive has no leader. Most of our subjects have fallen in line behind St. George, except for the small, faithful band of rebels you see here. The rebel goblins grunted earthily and raised their mitts and torches in a show of unity. St. George has the rest of them digging for treasure, the Queen said. Our hobbies are rough little gems in the earth, and nothing but free labor to that villainous swine. Jesse nodded. We've seen your hobbies at work, digging in the clearing, in the deep woods. Greedy rapscallion that he is, St. George wants the treasure all to himself. But we know now that our Hobbs' head is screwed back on tightly, and that he seeks isn't meant for the likes of him, or even us. It belongs to the draggy wagons. The dragons, you mean? Said Jessie. Her royal lowness nodded. Well, it happens that the two of us are dragon keepers, said Daisy. Are you now? The Queen gave them a shrewd look. Then where are you keeping your draggy wagon? We got split up from our draggy wagon, Daisy said carefully. She was feeling a tad defensive, so she changed the subject quickly. Can we help your lowness escape? Maybe use your hobgoblin's picks to break up the root ball? Her lowness shook her head. That won't work. The tree holds us fast. St. George has spelled it. He's enslaved all the trees. The trees were the first under his power. Weak, spindly suckers of the light and the water that they are. Then, owing to our own foolishness, the hobgoblins were next. Not that it took that much, except for yours truly. Hobgoblins are followers, not leaders. But who's next? That's what we ask ourselves as we sit here, fretting in our dungeon. St. George is a blight upon every earth, we tell you, a blight. Where did he come from? Jessie asked. Who knows? Said the Queen, with a shrug of her plump shoulders. Where does anything come from? He's been on Earth for ages. He lives off the draggy wagons, that one. He always has. He's a parasite. You know the old nursery rhyme, Georgie Porgy pudding and pie, killed the draggy wagons and made them cry. Jessie and Daisy started at each other and looked blankly. That certainly wasn't the version of the rhyme that they had heard growing up. The Queen went on. He goes in cycles. After he's slain dragons into near extinction, he sleeps. He woke up a short while ago from a long sleep in the collapsed mine shaft. How did he get out? Daisy asked. We couldn't rightly say, said the Queen. We've been asleep ourselves. When there are no dragons alive in the world, there's no magic. When there's no magic, we etherical beings either sleep or fade away. You might not know it to look at us, she said hotly. But we are beings of the etherical plane. I'm sure I mean, your lowness, Daisy said. Jessie, who had been listening closely, said, maybe somebody dug him up by accident. I doubt it, said the Queen. Our theory is that he sensed the arrival of a new draggy wagon, namely yours, and he just worked his way up out of the earth, like a sliver of glass out of finger. You have but to set it free, and it will return the tide of this battle. We won't lay a mitt on your treasure either. You have our royal word on that. Yes, but how do we get you out of here? Daisy said. We thought you'd never ask, said her royal lowness. You must fetch the golden pickaxe. Right, said Jessie. Just tell us where it is, and we'll get it for you. Oh, I can't help you there, said her lowness. But it could be anywhere, said Jessie. Not anywhere. The Queen shook her head and croaked. If it was somewhere down here, we would have found it already. Is your lowness 100% sure? Daisy asked. Sometimes I think I've lost something, and it winds up being right under my nose. What about these pickaxes here? She said, pointing to the ones resting on the hobgoblin's laps. Could any of these be the golden pickaxe? I mean, in disguise? She added doubtfully, because they certainly didn't look like they were made of gold. No, said the Queen. It's in the upper realm, somewhere nearby, I'm sure. The upper realm is your turf. We're sure you know where everything is and can locate it easily. Now hop to it, lammies, for Queen Hap. Will you? And that's where we have to stop today. We will finish chapter 7 tomorrow.